good representation of the Public Works Committee that's been working on this project for years, as well as some of the supervisors that had some questions. And we've got a number of consultants that Dean asked to be here. We've got Dean. Dean, you want to start with yourself, and then we'll go through and introduce yourself and the consultants?
Yeah, for those of you who don't know me, Dean Knox, Director for the Columbia County DPW Engineering Division. With me today is Chris Cornwell and Bob Jobin from our design consultants for this project, Newman Peterson Incorporated, GPI, otherwise known as GPI. Consultants that we've had on this and several other projects for bridges and highways, and have been with us on this project since day one. So that's our team here today. Jim Deloria and Bob Height are sub-consultants to GPI, do right-of-way acquisitions for federal aid projects and other types of projects across the state, and have been doing those for years and years and years. So we have a very experienced team working on this project with us, which is what we like to see. So that's who's here today.
Well, thank you. And I first want to say to my fellow supervisors, I apologize for not being at last month's full board meeting when a number of these questions came up. I was on vacation. I did listen to the meeting last night through the recording, and I'm sure I could have answered a number of those questions, and Dean certainly could have done a better job, but we weren't there to answer those questions. So I apologize, but here we are today, and I think Dean has done a fantastic job putting together a bunch of information for everybody to review, and hopefully those of you that haven't had time to review it do get to review it before next week's full board meeting when we bring up this resolution again for a vote. So that being said, Dean, do you want to run through some of those questions, or do we want to just turn it to the supervisors that continue to have questions?
Yeah, why don't you just open it up to the supervisors that have questions or want some additional information on the answers that or the responses that we provided to the questions that were submitted. I think we answered them in writing in great detail and completely. So, if there are any other questions that arise from that, feel free to let us try and answer those as well.
So can I jump in then, Supervisor Knott, as one of
Sure.
the supervisors that had questions? I want to start by saying I'm brand new to this board. I do realize that this project has been worked on for years and years and years, and I appreciate all the hard work that has gone into it, and I appreciate everybody being willing to pause for a moment to answer that myself and others had. I do realize that it was a lot of work to look through the questions and answer them, and Dean Knox, I really appreciate you taking the time to specifically address the concerns and questions that I had. So I did drive the road with Supervisor Weigelt the other day. I think there's no question that the road needs work, needs to be updated, paved, and I agree completely that the way to do that is to current specs, to safety, for pedestrians and bikers, adding in the shoulders. The piece that changes things a little bit for me is the eminent domain, and I guess my overall question that I think was addressed a little bit, but it was addressed by saying things like it'll only receive the aid if it follows the procedures for locally administered federal aid projects manual, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. I'm not. The overall question that I have is there any way possible to do this project in a way that addresses the culverts, addresses changing the turn, even addresses putting shoulders in where we don't need to take property by eminent domain? Is there any way to do this project, receive the federal funding, and not have to take 3 properties by eminent domain?
At this point, Supervisor Holding, I don't think so. The cross section that's laid out does get into private properties, as the road has never been upgraded to a county standard, and we did the least impactful project that we could come up with, where we keep the center line of the road exactly the same, throughout 95% of the road project, other than that Schroeder Road, which is a terrible intersection to begin with. And unfortunately, those cross sections, which give us a proper county ditch for drainage, the 4-foot shoulder, the proper slopes, encroach on private property by a few feet at 20 property or 19 property owners. And we've come to agreement with 16 of them, and the 3 property owners that we are proposing to take the property by eminent domain are just folks that just don't want the project done. And well, one party just wants too much money for the parcel that we want to acquire, far more than we can offer, and just really have not wanted to recognize the need for the project. So that's our last desperate option to do, is to acquire property by eminent domain.
So like on the one property that Kippy and I looked at, you know, it was a very tiny section. It's not possible because of the eminent domain requirement for the federal and state aid to realize that, you know, we're talking a tiny little section where it doesn't fall off. There's no safety concerns as far as having a shoulder on this piece. It's a straight piece of road. It's right there. So there's no way to kind of exempt the 3 pieces that wouldn't have to do with the turn or any, like my understanding is the 3 pieces on eminent domain are fairly small sections on one side of the road. So what I'm hearing you say is that that's not an option, or that's not ideal.
No, it's really not an option. We can't piecemeal a project together and take pieces out because a property owner doesn't agree with us, or we can't come to an agreement about the design or the compensation for the right of way. It has to be a consistent project as we represented to the DOT and the FHWA in our preliminary plans, and we have to carry that throughout the whole road from the end. And like I said, we years and years ago, we looked at taking all the humps and bumps out of the road and actually straightening the road. And we decided to abandon that type of plan a long time ago. And this project that we proposed or put an application for 7 or 8 years ago is the most least, or I'll say the least impactful, most benign project out there. And unfortunately, a couple of the landowners just don't agree with it. And we can never make it, everybody happy about our work, unfortunately. But
Yeah. And I understand that. For me, eminent domain is a big deal. You're essentially taking someone's property, even though you're giving them, fair market value or what is assessed as. But whatever their reason, to me, it's not really us to decide, oh, well, it's just a little bit of property. One of the property owners, I looked at their property, amount of room they'll have left between the road and their front door is actually very minimal. And so it does actually impact their house and their property much more than it might seem. My other built to specs is a safer way to do it. When I look at the final design report, which I will admit I didn't read every page of the 500 pages, but specifically section 3-6, I believe it was page 27, section 3.C.2.S safety considerations. It's basically saying that based on the detailed accident review, most accidents are relatively minor. It's deer collisions, and basically there were no accident clusters identified that would require mitigation as part of this project. What I'm reading is that by putting the shoulders in, we're not addressing an accident pattern or a safety concern that exists currently to say, hey, because there's not shoulders. I understand that, if there wasn't eminent domain involved, moving forward, it makes a lot more sense to put in shoulders. But am I correct to read this to say that there's not an existing pattern of safety concerns by that road not having shoulders as far as things that have actually happened due to the lack of shoulders?
No, that is not correct.
Why don't you guys field a little bit of that?
But when we talk about accident clusters in that particular portion, very specific sections that might, have issues. We didn't find any specific sections, but the overall general whole roadway has accidents on it that we're mitigating. It's just not a very specific section we're doing, work for. So that's what we're talking about. With the shoulders are actually helping with all of the accidents because it's spread out more than just a pinpoint, one corner, getting all of them and stuff like that. That's what we're doing.
And when we look at the highway as highway officials and professional design engineers like Bob and Chris that work on highways all the time, you don't just look at the accident rate for that 3-year period. You look at the road as a whole. Shoulders are a critically important improvement to all our county on every project that we do nowadays. So to not do that on one of our heaviest traveled roads, it just makes no sense. It's a very important addition to a highway, especially a highly traveled highway like Fish and Game Road is. Unfortunately, it's not a country lane like a lot of people want to represent it to be. The prevention of accidents is something that we do every day by putting guide rail up, by putting signs up, by lessening the slopes, by having a proper drainage ditch. All of these things lead to a safer highway, contrary to what a lot of people want to say. The highway engineering community knows that this is an improvement that this road definitely needs. It's a major collector road, 6th highest traffic count of all our county highways, county maintained highways, and just a critically important piece of this project. So.
And we, as part of this, we did look at all the design criteria for the roadway, which is documented in the design report. And we have set that design criteria, as Dean mentioned, to the minimum criteria,
right,
required for this. So we haven't tried to do anything above,
right,
but we try to meet that minimum requirements.
And even when we're doing this project, even the people that happen to be against a lot of this, project, they keep telling us how they've had close calls on this roadway, and that it's a dangerous roadway. We understand they still don't want it worked on, but everybody seems to have that same agreement that it's a dangerous roadway. It's just whether or not we do it.
I had sent out a accident from the Register Star that happened on Fish and Game last year. A bicyclist was hit by a pickup truck and severely injured on just up the road from Tischhauser. So, as you know, most of you town supervisors know, when you ride around the county on any given day, especially on weekends, our roads are filled with pedestrians and bicyclists. It's incredible the amount of traffic that we see on our roads compared to, and I've been working for the county for 42 years, and used to hardly ever see a bicyclist or a pedestrian on our roads. But people want to get healthy. They want to use our roads. We do have gorgeous places to look at, and we're trying to make it safe for those folks. And our funding agencies are requiring these types of things to accommodate multimodal use: pedestrians, bicyclists, motor vehicles, trucks. Anybody who has the right to use the road, we're trying to make it safe for them. So that's what it boils down to. There's always the chance that somebody is going to have an accident tomorrow, or 5 people have an accident tomorrow. Getting some of the obstructions out of the way, getting some of the vegetation cleared back a little bit to build the shoulders and some of these slopes helps us see the deer. We have deer in every road that we ever travel during the day, at nighttime, doesn't matter what part of the day it is. Those small improvements can save people's lives and prevent a lot of property damage. So there's a whole host of reasons why we're doing this project. And it's all safety related. There's no hidden agenda like some folks want to represent. There's no, it's none of that. It's a project that we do each year on some county road or multiple county roads to put shoulders on. So.
And if I could just interject, this is Matt Morrell. I asked Kelly and Sherry had given me a list of all the meetings that this project was discussed on, because some people have intimated that we're trying to ram this through, and it just happened. I've got a list here of 27 meetings since July 2013 where this project's been discussed. 27 meetings where the public had an opportunity to go to any one of these meetings. So This is not something that's just being rammed through at the last minute. It's something that's been well thought out, and our engineering department, the Board of Supervisors, have taken their time to look at the best options. Again, 27 meetings, plus there was a public hearing held in 2017.
Right. And besides that, I personally, from my office, wrote letters to each of the property owners 3 separate times, updating them on the project progress we've made, 2015, 2017, and 2019, because it does stretch out. The design process on a federal aid project does stretch out for various reasons. And I offered to meet with those folks, with our design team, to discuss impacts to their property, comments on the property. We probably met with 15 to 20 property owners, some of which we are acquiring property from, some of which we don't need property from. But they were willing to meet with us and talk about the project. I can't force people to call me. I know they came to, some folks came to Kippy's town board meetings on occasion over the last few years, right, Kip? And you always referred them to my office. From what
Absolutely.
Do you want to say anything? No.
So there's been, this is a well-known project, and folks have had their opportunity to say what they want about it, and we've gone far beyond the public involvement requirements that we have for a federal aid project, and I do that with all my projects. So.
And I would like to interject here. This is Kippy Weigel. Just common sense of all us are drivers. We know when there's no shoulders or bad shoulders, what do? We hug the center line because we don't want to damage the car or do anything. So if you have a section where there's no shoulder and then there's shoulders, people are being pulling out in the middle of the road. That's just common sense. It's exactly how we drive, and that's what's going to happen. And especially if somebody's riding a bike along the shoulder of the road and all of a sudden they have to go to the middle. Actually looking for more danger, I think, with leaving 2 spots or 3 spots out of play. The other thing that, Dean, you said that there was 3 people that are holding out, and you said, but one of them just wants more money. So I put it down to 2 people because the other one's willing to sign if we gave him more money on that. And one more thing, I just want to let everybody know, we had an incident on 23 where the state wouldn't put a guardrail up because they said statistics showed we didn't need it there because the beavers had built a lake. And 2 years later, it was 2 weeks later after we had sent the letters and they denied us, we had a car flip over upside down. And luckily the 2 people that were pissed, somebody going by. So statistically, I don't like statistical danger. And I think Dean is doing a great job and his staff to make sure that this is going to be the safest road for everybody from all over the country who drives on this road. We have to take a little bit of land. Trust me, Dean is working with everybody that we're taking land from to make sure they're satisfied with what they end up with.
Yeah, if we have to get involved with somebody's landscape fence, we always offer to replace it. If we have tree removals that we have to do for power line relocation or the road itself, we always offer to replace trees. I realize we can't replace a 24-inch maple, but we always offer to do landscaping, to put back a screen or whatever, and we continue to do that on this project as well. So,
I've got a comment. If I can make a comment.
Yes, Sarah.
Sarah Sterling. Yeah, I've driven that road quite a bit. I actually went on again today, and it is in terrible shape. I also read the 500-page, or skimmed over the 500-page, but at the end, there's actually a hearing that was in 2004. And people have been trying to get the speed reduced there all that time. And Mary Koch at that time asked for the speed reduction, but also wanted better safety for pedestrian and bicycles at that time. And she also did not want the road widened, but the only way to make safety for bicycles is to add those little shoulders. And when you look at the portion that's already been done, and it's still in excellent condition, and it just, to me, it's a no-brainer. And I think that everybody who's complaining has certainly had an adequate time to address this.
Thank you, Sarah. Dean, I'd also like to just bring everybody's attention, and maybe while you got the consultants there, not every project in the county can qualify for federal aid money. and the federal aid requirements, just to find a project that can qualify for federal aid and to get the federal aid. I know you and I have attended all of the transportation advisory meetings for the last 10 years or so, and
Right.
the money is not an easy thing to pursue, and there's strict requirements as to when you can get it and when you can use it. And I think
Right.
it's very fortunate that we've identified a project that we can use it on. So could you just speak to that?
Yeah, the county has 35 or so miles of what's called federal aid highway. It's normally the higher use roads, major collectors, major rural collectors is the classification that deems it eligible for federal aid. And Fish and Game Road is one of them. The entire stretch of Fish and Game Road is eligible for federal aid. I think it's my job to try and get as much federal aid and state aid as I can for highway projects, bridge projects. And those are the roads we like to get that aid for, so we can use our county money and our CHIPS money on those roads that are not eligible for federal aid. And that's what our highway division spends its paving money on, is roads that aren't eligible for federal aid. And that's 235 other miles of road that we have that is not eligible for federal aid. So it's important that we take advantage of this type of aid, because it gives us a complete project. If we were doing this with local money, we'd be doing it over 5 years, and it would still cost the same. You still have to replace 2 large culverts. You still have to, that's $1 million plus right there. You have to rebuild the road, put guide rail up, and put signs up. As you improve a road, legally you should do those things. So,
I'd like to,
the federal is very important.
Yes, Jeannie.
yeah, I'd like to speak on behalf of this project. I was in the committee when we voted in favor of it. I understood that there were questions last time around, but I'm looking at this from the perspective, I do a lot of cycling. So Columbia County has really advertised itself as a biking destination, and we're trying to attract people to ride on our roads. It's not all about rail trails, although they're wonderful, but real serious cyclists are always also out on the roads. And for instance, I ride on Route 23 going towards Catamount, or Route 22 going south from North Hillsdale down into Hillsdale. And when you're riding along on a shoulder and you've got cars coming up behind you on your left shoulder, and all of a sudden either there's all kinds of gravel and the shoulder's all broken up, or the shoulder just disappears, that is a very dangerous and frightening situation. And if you're trying to stay on the shoulder, then the next thing you're kind of veering into the lane to try to get into a safer space. So I think these shoulders are important to cyclists and to motorists, obviously, but they're also important if we're really going to advertise ourselves as a biking destination, which I happen to think is a very important part of our economy.
Thank you. Anybody else got questions for any of the consultants that are online here for us?
Yeah, it looked like some recent correspondences that showed concern for, county budget money going towards this, or heightened uncertainty of remuneration from whoever is giving us this money. During these COVID times, is there a concern about federal or Marchicelli remuneration?
Donnell, that I can't answer. The money that's allocated to federal transportation projects such as this one comes from the Federal Highway Trust Fund lockbox. That all the fuel tax we pay, tax and the truck taxes that are paid across the country go into that. So I think that's a fairly safe source of funding every year. Sometimes it's been a little short on cash, but the general fund from Washington sometimes has to make up some funding to it, or give some funding to it. But as I stated in my write-up and some of my responses, we have done 75 plus federal aid claims. We've never been short at the dime. So COVID is a bad thing, and it has certainly impacted the economic state of the country and the state. But I'm pretty confident that we would be made whole at the end of the day.
And the FAA just turned right around with your most recent project, correct? I mean, that was,
The FAA paid us, whether it's $20 or $2 million in 3 days. The money is back in our bank account. Yeah. FHWA is a little slower, but FAA is incredibly fast. It's all electronic. PJ, you can speak to that.
Yeah, just like
But,
Dean said, historically, we've never had a problem receiving funding. It is a little bit longer, maybe 30 to 40 days, but historically, it has not been a problem. And I mean, it's, again, it's paying for 95% of the project.
Right.
Dean, what's the breakdown again? It's 95% federal?
It's for the federal, 15% state Marchicelli, and 5% county.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And the total prices? Total? Can you hear me?
4.7.
Total?
Pretty good.
One second.
Total cost of
Total
the job.
project cost, 0.748 million.
4.7, which is design, right away, construction inspection. All eligible costs.
And the other part of this, Donnell, you've heard us talk a lot about cash flow this year, and, you know, if we proceed on with this project, you know, we're not, this isn't gonna really go to bid till probably next year or so anyway, Dean, if things went well. You know, these projects take a long time, and it's already been in the pipe for a long time, but the worst thing you don't want to do is turn down federal aid money. It takes very hard to get it, and if you don't go for it, use the next time too, so that's a challenge.
Right. Yeah, if you bail on a project at this point in time, you will be responsible for paying what we've spent back to the federal government. For what we've paid for design and right-of-way acquisition.
I have a comment.
thanks, Dean.
Linda? Yep.
I have a comment. I'm just curious. I know it's off the subject, but Fairview Avenue, I think, is probably worse than any of the roads in Columbia County. And I'm wondering, since all the transportation people are here, how we can move to make that a better, safer place.
So I can answer that real quick, but maybe Dean can help out. That is a state highway, and we have at the Transportation Advisory Committee that has been discussed. The last couple supervisors have pushed for having a traffic study to figure out what they're going to do with that. And Dean might can speak to that better because he's been around longer than I have, and this has been talked about for years and years. But we recently did try and get them to do a study. Where are we with that, Dean?
Yeah, I think the town of Greenport is working with their town engineer and DOT to do a corridor study, which the DOT at the last few Transportation Advisory Committee meetings has said is the first necessary step in looking at rehabilitating, reconstructing Fairview Avenue. And yes, Linda, it's probably the #1 priority for state highways for just about all the membership of the Columbia County Transportation Advisory Committee over the last couple of years. So yeah, I think we all recognize the need for sidewalks or shoulders. I drive that road a lot at night, and it's amazing how many people are walking and biking on that road just to get to work and to go home and do the things they need to do to live. So we're always stumping for some work on Fairview Avenue at the Transportation Advisory Committee level. Yeah, absolutely.
I believe
We can advocate for it. That's a state highway, so.
I believe Supervisor Eldridge is on this call.
There you have it.
I am on the call, and the New York State Department of Transportation is supposed to take over the corridor study this fall. And basically, for each CTEC meeting that I've been to, it's been brought up that this was 20 years in the making, 20 years ago, and nobody could make a decision, which everybody knows I can make a decision. So it's basically Greenport chasing a 20-year ghost where nobody could make a decision, and there was money there which was dried up from nobody being able to make a decision. And you know, at this point in time, you know, they always say there is no money, and there's money out there. So the last CTAC, they will take over the corridor study, and that's supposed to go down in the spring.
Yeah, Kathy, I was chairing the Columbia County Planning Board, and that was a big thing we did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
To try to get that project through, and
It was horrible.
yeah, it never went. And it
Because
was
I
fun.
booked Charlie Vianney. I went to see Charlie after I got elected, and he spoke with me at great length about that project and everything that was going on. And they had a couple of designs, and nobody could decide which was the better of
Yeah.
the two. And I mean, that's
Absolutely
something.
correct.
Something.
Yeah.
And now, and whatever they were to do with Fairview, I mean, you're never going to stop the congestion because there's traffic, but it's to help the flow and the safety, which is necessary, sidewalks, and you've got that bike path that's coming down, so it's the use of the bike
Yeah.
trail.
And, it's unfortunate that we reside in DOT Region 8, so
Yes.
we're like the poor stepchild of all the counties that are in it. Most of them are the very urban, well-developed counties to the south of us. And, unfortunately, the lion's share of the money goes to those congested areas and areas that just carry tremendous amounts of traffic. And that's where their focus is as far
It
as
is.
the DOT. Local money is separated from the state's money a little bit. We have a little more control over that, but when it comes to DOT projects, boy, it's tough to get
It's
something
tough.
like that.
And I will that you, Dean, and everybody on that CTAC committee has been very helpful and has gone to bat with me for Fairview Avenue for each CTAC meeting that I've been to. So, and I thank you for that. So.
And it's what, a mile and a half worth of work, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
When you get right down to it, it should be able to get done.
I know. It should.
It really should be.
And the way it is to do another traffic study where there have been traffic studies done. I mean, Fairview hasn't changed, just the amount of traffic. So it's just, but you can't, the way they have it set up, it's on a checklist. So you know this, I'm just kind of letting everybody know. In order to get to B or C, you have to do A, which is a traffic study, which is redundant at this point. And then you go down the list. So, but we'll get it done.
Well, thank you, Kathy. And I want to remind any of the supervisors, that there were TAC meetings where these things are being discussed all the times a year. So you're welcome. Is there any more pertinent questions to Fish and Game Road while we've got these experts on the line now?
I had a couple questions. Just about it's about the public process for me is that, if the part of the resolution is that we're going to do eminent domain without a public hearing, I want to feel really confident that I understand what the public would say if there was a public hearing, and specifically the people who would have their land taken. So I just haven't really seen that information. And I know that it was cited that we've had 27 meetings on this subject. I don't know the specific context for these meetings, but I know that especially the committee meetings, but I think sometimes even the full board meetings can be very difficult for the public to know what's on the agenda. I think for the committee meetings, we often just cite departments. So it would be hard to know that this was coming up on the agenda. So it'd be hard to know to attend, to be able to give public comment. So I imagine many of those meetings, it would have been very difficult for people to know that something was on that agenda. But if there was any sort of archive of the public comments that have been made, that would be really helpful for me. I know it was documented about all this outreach, but I just haven't really seen what the product of that outreach was. And so for me, that's something that I think is still missing from the project, is sort of what the public what kind of feedback they've given.
In Appendix C of the final design report, the entire public hearing, public information meeting transcripts and outreach efforts were shown in that.
Okay.
And as I said, we've had meetings with probably close to 20 of the property owners out there to discuss the project and the impacts on their property, or if we weren't impacting their property, what the project was going to look like. And the common themes, as I mentioned in my responses, were speeding traffic, truck traffic, and the fact that we want it to be a country lane. And speeding is not something, there is a 45-mile-an-hour legal speed limit on the road. It's not 55. The DOT dropped it 25 years ago to 45. Probably pretty appropriate for that road. Many of our country roads, our county roads have a 45 on them. So speeding is one of those things that's an enforcement issue and a personal choice when you get in the car to drive fast, drive faster than the speed limit, whatever it happens to be. You know, we can't resolve that. So that's an enforcement issue. The sheriff's office can be contacted. The state police can be contacted. Truck traffic, it's a public highway. Truck traffic can use it. That's how folks operate their business sometimes. They have to use certain roads to get their business done, their work done. The country lane aspect of it, and again, these are the three common themes that we heard, correct, gentlemen? It's not a country lane. It hasn't been for many, many years. As Greenport developed, so did the traffic volumes on Fish and Game Road, because that's the short route to Greenport. That's the commercial center of the county, and that's the quickest way to get there. So, you know, you can't tell people you can't use a public road. So, unfortunately, those three common themes that we heard from many folks are not things we can address.
And, you know, Dean, in my eyes, we still are going to maintain this as a country road. It'll be a more sufficient country road, but it's not going to be a 4-lane I-90 or something.
No,
you know?
absolutely not. No, absolutely not. The same people that use it today will use it after the project is done. You still have a great view of the Catskills as you come down the hill. The folks that like to bike and walk will have a better shot at doing it safely. And the speed limit is going to be 45. The speed limit's 45 now. The town of Claw River can always ask the DOT to review it again, and the DOT determines by law. So the town sent in a request to look at the speed limit again about 10 years ago, and the DOT determined that the 45 was appropriate again, because there had been no new development on the road since the first time they put the 45 on it. So, but that's always a choice that the town of Claw River can do, is to put in another request to look at the speed limit on the road.
I'd like to speak to that if I could. I would just like to say that besides knowing the sheriff pretty well, that we know that I also have runs the state trooper barracks. So trust me, I call a lot when I need troopers to go on roads that people are speeding on. They get there right away. So it's the speeding problem is right. It's done by the state police and the sheriffs, and I make sure that the state police are there to watch and look for the speeders as best we can.
Does that answer your questions, Michael?
Yeah, I appreciate it. My other question is about biking, and some of it is about outside of the project area. I think especially for serious bikers, this is a 1.9 mile section. That's, you know, I think it's going to be a lot more impactful if it's part of a longer route. So do you know offhand if 217 has a good shoulder for biking, and if the other part of Fish and Game Road outside of the project area has a good shoulder for biking, so that this 1.9 mile section would connect a good bikeable area to another good bikeable area?
Yeah, the rest of Fish and Game Road from Demita Drive, where our project starts, west to Route 66, has been upgraded over the last 20-some years with paved shoulders. There's a short section in there that will need work eventually, that was done with federal money about 30 years ago. And back then, I think the shoulder requirement was 2.5 to 3 feet. So there's a little bit of a narrower shoulder there, but it is paved. And 217, being a state road, has pretty wide lanes and does have some paved shoulder on it as well. So, yes.
Okay, thanks.
I think, yes.
I just wanted to comment too, if I can, this is Kelly, regarding Michael's comment about the agendas not being posted. They are posted the Friday before to the Board of Supervisors website. And if you've ever seen Dean Knox's agendas, they're quite detailed. So everybody will know what is coming up in Dean's meetings, just so you know.
I meant for the public, though. I think
the public sees those as well,
abbreviated.
Michael.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yes, on the Board of Supervisors website. If they go to the upcoming meetings. All of the agendas are posted, that the department heads submit, so they know what's coming up in the meetings.
They've always got their local supervisor to talk to. All right, is there any other questions, comments, or concerns on this particular resolution, or should we move it back to, or I guess it is moved to full board?
Well, thank you guys for the information session and the answers to the questions. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care now.
See you
Good
soon.
night.
Good night, everyone.
Happy birthday, Matt.
Take care.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Matt.